Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. This week I'm still in Somerset, which I thought was nothing more than a rural county with the odd quarry thrown in, but no. As we discovered last week, it's home to Babysham and the Somerset volcano. I can only hope today's trip is just as exciting as we explore more of Somerset on a journey from Yeovil to Weston super Mare. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and Yeovil is a bit odd because it's a town that expanded thanks to the leather and glove industries, but in more modern times focuses on defence and the aerospace industries. Not really what you'd expect from a poky little town in Somerset, although not that little really. In the days of my guidebook there were around 15,000 people living here. Today there are over 50,000, placing it at number 4 on the list of largest towns in Somerset. But what of the leather industry to which the town owes its existence? Well, for nearly 200 years a company called Pittard's made Yeovil their home. Started by Charles Pittard, at age 14 he began working in the leather industry before working his way up before acquiring the company that he worked for to create Pittard's Leather. Initially they started working out of a small factory in the centre of Yeovil, but as the years went by and the company became more successful, by the 20th century the large factory we see today was set up. It was certainly a huge success story for Yeovil. The quality of the product was renowned worldwide and Pittard's Leatherware was the choice for the likes of the royal family. But you'll notice the factory is looking rather quiet, and indeed Pittard's is no more, announcing their closure in 2023 following a slow decline in sales. Moving on from Yeovil, and we're going to use the A37, which remains pretty much as it did in the old days until it joins a newer dual carriageway, where we'll then pick up the B3151, which again remains mostly unchanged, and this will deliver us to our next destination, the village of Somerton, which sounds very similar to Somerset, and indeed the village name was used when naming the county. For a while Somerton was the county town of Somerset, but this didn't last for any significant period of time. In the days of my guidebook there are around 1,800 people living here, and like Yeovil most of them would have worked within the leather industry, but as we've discovered that industry is mostly on its arse. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Somerton's Market Cross, which is an unusual octagonal structure built in 1673. Today it serves no function, but at the time of its construction it would have been used during the town's weekly markets as a cold store for perishable items such as milk and cheese. A short distance from Somerton is the large village or small town of Street, and when walking on a street in Street you might like some footwear, and Street is perhaps best known for being home to Clark's Footwear, a company set up by a Quaker family in 1825 to manufacture rugs. One of the Clark family members had the idea of using some of the rug offcuts to create slippers, and that would eventually grow into the massive footwear company known as Clark's. With that came expansion, and a large factory was built here in Street to manufacture their products, which they did so for many years from the same location. But in the 90s, the factory was faced with closure. But rather than let the factory be demolished or fall into a state of ruin, the MD of Clark's at the time put forward the idea of turning the existing buildings into Clark's Village, a factory outlet shopping centre. The first of its kind in the UK, and at the time a very strange concept, but it's still here over 30 years later, having grown from its original form to feature 90 retailers. Next up is the town of Glastonbury, which is so close to Street by the time I finish this voiceover we'll have arrived. To get there we can use the A39, which has had the odd roundabout added in recent times but mostly follows the old route, so that's good enough for me. Anyway, we're here. Yes, in the days of my guidebook Glastonbury was a small village with around 4,500 residents. Today it's much the same but with 9,000 residents. Glastonbury is most well known for the Glastonbury Festival, a huge music festival that takes place at least 6 miles from here in a place called Pilton. It's also known for Glastonbury Tor, possibly one of the most photographed places in England. It's a hill formed from rocks dating back to the Jurassic period, and on the top sits the ruins of a tower. This tower is believed to be the remains of what would have been one of a few buildings sited on top of Glastonbury Tor. The tower was part of St Michael's Church, originally constructed out of timber in the 11th or 12th century. Apparently it was destroyed in an earthquake, so was rebuilt using stone in the 1500s. King Henry VIII then came along and said nope, demolishing everything except for the tower, which, following a few restoration projects, still stands today. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit what it calls the British Lake Village. Today we'd call it Glastonbury Lake Village, and it's described as the best preserved prehistoric village ever found in the UK. I'd describe it as a field. which is probably more accurate considering the village was abandoned in the year 50 AD. But what exactly is a lake village? It's nearly as the name suggests. In the old days, this whole area was a boggy marsh or swampland, and for some reason they decided to build foundations out of clay and wood and construct buildings on the unstable land. At certain times of the year, the land surrounding the village would flood with water, hence the term lake village. However, boggy marshland village would probably be a more accurate description. Coming up next, the smallest city in England. Welcome to Wells, and indeed it's a city with only around 13,000 residents. By comparison, the town of Yeovil has around 50,000 residents. So why does Wells get to call itself a city? Because it seems to tick some of the right boxes. Roman settlement? Tick. Cathedral? Tick. And also because the Queen said so. But since it's called Wells, are there any wells in Wells? Well, here's a well in Wells, one of 3 wells in Wells. I know it looks like a pond, but apparently it's a well, and the water makes its way here from the Mendip Hills. Next to the well is Wells Cathedral, constructed between 1180 and 1345. However, it's believed a church of sorts has been at this location since the year 766. Interestingly, in the grounds of the cathedral, although not that obvious, are the remains of a building that dates back to the year 909. And an interesting feature of the cathedral is known as Chain Bridge, a walkway that connects to a residential street, but not just any street. This is the oldest residential street, most likely in Europe. It's known as Vicar's Close, and it's a rare example of a 14th century planned residential street that remains mostly in its original form. An interesting feature is that the pathway or roadway is tapered so that it looks longer when viewed from the main entrance, which means, of course, it should look shorter when viewed from the other end. I don't know, what do you reckon? In any case, it was built as a way to accommodate priests or whoever else was working at the cathedral, which is why there's a direct walkway from the street into the cathedral. You wouldn't want to be mixing with the ordinary peasant folk, and I assume this is why the street was kept locked behind a massive gatehouse. Nice street though, for sure, although I don't think I'd want to live there with idiots and their cameras coming around all day long. Anyway, we're off to Cheddar, which is indeed a cheese, but it's also a town. I do like cheddar though. The cheese, I mean. I could gorge on it all day. My guidebook suggests maybe we'd like to visit Cheddar Gorge, which today attracts over 500,000 visitors a year, and I can see why. It's quite remarkable. The 137-metre deep gorge is gorged out of limestone that was formed during the Triassic period 225 million years ago. However, more importantly, Cheddar is the only place where you can get 100% genuine cheddar cheese. The problem with cheddar cheese is that it doesn't have a protected designation of origin. Take, for example, the Cornish pasty. It can only be sold and called a Cornish pasty when it's made using certain ingredients to a specific recipe. Otherwise, it would just be a pasty. Another good example is the Melton Mowbray pork pie, but with cheddar, none of that. Any Tom, Dick or Harry can make cheddar cheese however and wherever they like, meaning, is the cheddar cheese we buy in the shops even cheddar? I don't know, but what I do know is that in Cheddar you can get 100% genuine cheddar cheese, which is far better than anything you'll find in the shops. It is really good, to be fair. Right, it's time to get on, and we're heading to our final destination, which requires the A371. We'll meander our way along through Sidcot and Banwell, and eventually we'll arrive in the town of Weston-super-Mare. In the days of my guidebook, Weston was a very busy place with around 39,000 residents, and the town size is mostly down to tourism because Weston was seen as a mightily fine seaside resort. It was. It's probably not now. Back in the day, we might have enjoyed Burnbeck Pier. It's 351 metres long and it opened in 1867, but as you can see, it's not exactly in the best shape. But it is interesting because it's not like your usual pier. There's actually an island just off the shoreline, and the pier connects the mainland to this island, and apparently it's the only pier in the country that does this. There is, of course, the functioning Grand Pier just around the corner. Fish and chips, coin-operated arcade machines and ice cream await you should you wish to visit. But I wanted to come and look at this building, which today is a public toilet. There's a bit of a mystery surrounding this building. It's possible that it was once owned and used by the Commercial Cable Company, an organisation that in the late 1800s succeeded in installing the first transatlantic communication cables between the United States and England. The cables ran across the Atlantic from the United States to Waterville in Ireland and then on to Weston-super-Mare, providing communication between these countries. The last cable was laid in 1923, the same year that my guidebook was published. The mystery is that nobody knows for sure where these communication cables came ashore at Weston or what they connected to. They had to run into some sort of building, and it's possible that it was this building, or it's just a public toilet building and always has been. We just don't know. What we also don't know is why people from the United States would want to communicate with anyone from Weston-super-Mare. That's still to be determined all these years later. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'd be wicked sweet awesome. awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John. You've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.